It comes time when we're going to take his deposition. I get him to, what's your name? Isn't it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
Right.
I always get calls from media, how do your clients feel about this? They just want to be done with all of this Epstein stuff. The sad thing is that I think that rich and powerful people, once they become rich and powerful, they become the magnified persona of whoever they are.
Welcome back to Courtside Convo. We pick up now with part 2 of Spencer Kuvin.
We're sitting at a table, and Joe's sitting across from me, and Joe's doing this, looking over his shoulder the whole time. And I'm like, Joe, what's going on? He's like, man, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? He's like, they're following me. They're checking my garbage. They're digging through my garbage. They're going through my internal affairs files from back in New York, they're pulling files on me here. He's like, I have never seen anything like this. I'm like, this is crazy. What's going on?
Something was, this was more than just one.
What's happening?
Yeah.
And he started to outline to me what he had been doing in surveilling Epstein's home and watching these girls go in and out of that home every day, multiple different young girls going in and out, and how he had started interviewing some of these girls. And the stories that all these girls were telling were all like the same story. And it was just unbelievable. So at that point, I realized, whoa, we've got something here. So that young girl ended up being the first one that went to police and really kind of started the avalanche of cases.
Yeah.
And, he had found probably upwards of 20 to 30 young girls that he had talked to, and all began telling the same story about what was happening. So we started our investigation, started interviewing people, and then all of a sudden girls started coming forward and wanting representation. So I represented back then about 4 of the young women. Ted Leopold was involved at the beginning and helped our client through some of the criminal work. And then at that point, when it became the civil cases, he turned it over to me to help.
Yeah.
And then we started filing suit. And obviously, once we got into litigation, we ended up in a deposition.
Yeah. Yeah. So when that deposition took place, did you know or have any idea how broad this was in terms of international figures and all this kind of stuff? Or was it still just sort of the local cases?
Yeah, it was really just local, right? There was some really bad local press about the girls that were accusing Epstein, and all kinds of things were being said about them, and they were just going after his money, and they were lying, and they were sleazy. And I mean, there were some really bad articles.
Right.
About
These are high school kids.
High school kids,
yeah.
Right? 14, 15, 16 years old. But they were just getting smeared at the time, and it was all kind of local, and nobody was really picking up on the story. It was just not that big a story, and we were trying our best to get people to understand the breadth of this, and it wasn't happening. So I had been working with a reporter from Palm Beach. So as you know, being a local here, there's 2 papers, right? There's the Palm Beach Post and there's Palm Beach Daily News.
Yeah.
And the Daily News is what people call the shiny sheet.
Right.
Right. And it would be kind of an insert in Palm Beach Post.
Yeah.
And the Daily News is really the news of Palm Beach Island.
Yeah.
All the balls and the fancy stuff and all that.
Yeah. A lot of society photos.
A lot of society.
Yeah.
Well, the Daily News was really the paper that Epstein and his people would read. So I decided I was going to work with a reporter from Palm Beach Daily News, because that's what him and his friends would be reading. And I started feeding her information about the case, and she started reporting on it. And he hated that, because when it showed up in that paper, it was like, oh, now his friends know what's going on.
Right.
So I'm feeding her stories and working with her. And it comes time when we're going to take his deposition. And we sit down and try and figure out, okay, look, his lawyers are fighting us on this, saying, why do you need to take his deposition? And he's in a criminal case and you shouldn't be able to take it. And there were all kinds of roadblocks that they were putting up.
Right.
And we just kept plowing forward. So eventually it comes to the time where I get to take it. And we start strategizing back at the office. What are we going to do? He's probably not going to answer much. He'll take the fifth. So pretty much every question I ask. So we come up with the idea, okay, well, look, let's see if we can antagonize him so that he says something stupid or blurts something out. Or alternatively, let's use it as an attempt to kind of turn the media narrative on the case. So I sat down at the time with some of the attorneys from my office, and then I also made some calls to friends of mine that I knew that I worked with back at Montgomery's office, and started spitballing ideas about questions and stuff. And I had a list of like 10 questions. And we had to make the questions based on the evidence in the case.
Right, sure.
Right? They couldn't just be from left field,
Right.
crazy. So we had the probable cause affidavit. And right there in the PC affidavit, it had a description by one of the victims of his private parts.
Right.
So I was like, well, it's relevant, number one, because how does a 14-year-old know what your private parts look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's personal, embarrassing, potentially, because of the description of it. And, maybe it would antagonize him. It goes after his manhood, and it kind of knocks him down a few pegs because he thought he was just this
Right.
perfect guy, So that was our question.
Yeah, right.
And I had it all ready to go, and I knew I was going to come right out of the box with it just to set the tone and tenor of everything.
Yeah.
So basically, as you know, because you were there, I get him to, what's your name? Isn't it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
Right.
And you can see on the video when you watch it, he kind of smirks. Like, did this little punk really ask me that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm like, I apologize. Those aren't my words. That's written in the affidavit, that the police drafted. And then he gets up and walks out.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the best thing that could have happened, because then
So let me stop you there and ask you, like, the video ended up on the Palm Beach Post website the next day. How did that, and I don't know if this was intentional, if you anticipated this happening. So I think I know what happened, which is once his attorneys filed, wanted sanctions against you guys for doing this, and they submitted the video as evidence.
No, the other way around, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, but so we had competing motions for sanctions.
Okay.
But what originally happened is that I was actually talking with not only the reporter at the Palm Beach Daily News, but there was a media guy that did kind of like gossip news at the time.
Okay.
I can't
Was
remember.
it Jose Lambier?
Yes. It was Jose.
Yeah, he had a few people at the TV station that we worked at too.
Yes,
So yes, we know him. Yeah.
So Jose had been calling me and asking me if there was any good stories and that kind of thing. So when Epstein walked out, I realized I had an opportunity to be able to file a motion for sanctions for improper termination of the deposition, because the question itself was relevant. I could ask it. And I thought, well, I could file just the paper motion, or I could file the motion and the video. And if I file the motion and the video, then the judge would be able to see it. But also, at that point, it becomes public
record. Yeah.
Right? And the bar rules are very clear that once it's public record and in the public domain, the press is free to take whatever it wants and use it because it's public.
Right.
So I filed a motion and attached a copy of the video. So I then, may have made a call, possibly.
A little heads up.
And said, you might want to check the court file today. And it ends up everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and look, Epstein was upset because I did it. They filed a motion for sanctions against me. They filed a bar complaint against me at the time. I've still got the bar complaint from Jeffrey Epstein to me with his signature on it that he filed himself, which went nowhere. But it was interesting. It was definitely a whirlwind at the time.
So from there, though, I think even back then, the case still didn't really blow up into this,
No.
international thing where I don't know how many documentaries you've been interviewed
Yeah.
for and things like that. So, what was kind of phase two of the case, from your point of view?
So those cases went on for like 2 or 3 years. We settled, and I think pretty much all of the victims settled. And the only thing that kind of lingered around was there was a lawsuit that Epstein had actually filed against one of the lawyers, Brad Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that case kind of lingered around. And that had to do with the factoring cases that Rothstein was trying to factor and get money from some of these cases. And,
Okay.
so that case kind of lingered. But otherwise, my clients all resolved their cases and settled with Epstein. And it was quiet for the longest time.
Yeah. Years.
And then I got a call from Julie Brown at the Miami Herald saying that she was investigating the cases and what happened. And she was doing a deep dive, a deep investigative piece over a period of a year, trying to figure out and talk to victims, as many as she could find. And
Right.
she actually found victim one, my client, who didn't want to be found and never gave her name. Still to this day hasn't publicly, said that she's a victim, victim one. And Julie actually located her and interviewed her and talked to other victims about what had happened and the non-prosecution agreement, that awful sweetheart deal that the government gave them and all that. And I did a bunch of interviews with Julie for her story about how I saw the case go down.
Yeah.
And then she came out with her piece. And it was just an amazing 3-part, piece that she put in the Miami Herald over a period of 3 days. And then that story got picked up by the AP and it went kind of nationwide and then it kind of went worldwide.
Yeah.
And I think that's what started the reinvestigation by the Southern District of New York to see if they could continue prosecution against Epstein. So still really nothing. Great piece. Don't really hear much. And then it was months later, if not a year, when I'm sitting in bed on the weekend and news story pops up on CNN. Epstein's arrested in Peterborough Airport.
Right.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So were you involved in, I guess, in what way were you involved in the case from that point forward, or were you involved in it at all?
Yeah. So, once they decided they were going to prosecute him again, he gets arrested, media becomes interested again. So I start talking to people about what had happened in the cases and how it all played out. And then, he ends up dying in jail.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. There was all kinds of media around that and everything that was happening. But then they opened up the fund to be able to compensate victims when they seized all of his assets in the Virgin Islands and here in the States. And when they opened up the fund, a bunch of the young women that were involved in the original cases, some of my old clients, as well as some new ones, came forward and I helped them through the process of getting compensated through the fund.
Yeah.
So over time, I represented about 9 victims total through both the original proceeding and then the fund.
Now, how did Ghislaine Maxwell fit in with that? That's another...
That was a whole nother.
Yeah.
Even after. So after Epstein died, then a couple years later, they decided they're going to prosecute Maxwell.
Yeah.
So then that whole proceeding starts up in New York and they prosecute her and she gets convicted. And it's interesting because along the way, throughout the process from dating back to 2007 all the way to the present, every time something happens in the case like that, I always get calls from media, how do your clients feel about this? And how do your clients feel about this? And like, geez, they're just tired of feeling anything about this case, you know?
Yeah.
And they've been disappointed so many times over the years. He doesn't get prosecuted. He gets a sweetheart deal. They're depressed and they're upset about that, the way that goes down.
Right.
He pressures them into settlements early on in the case because he's putting immense amounts of pressure and litigation on these young girls. They're depressed about that. Then he's rearrested and he's allowed to die in jail. They're upset about that. And then Maxwell's arrested and she gets transferred to a sweetheart prison, the federal system. They're upset about that. It's just the government has let these girls and these victims down for so long and so many repeated times.
Yeah.
That they're just tired. They just want to be done with all of this Epstein stuff.
How do you think the case has changed just the way that, you know, we look at the world, or,
Yeah.
you know, cases like this? I think it's changed the way, you know, people think about relationships between men and women. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been very profound. How do you think it's changed everything?
I mean, you got to think about it in the terms of the time that it was happening. This was pre-Me Too. This was pre Harvey Weinstein. This was pre-Bill Cosby. You know, it was before all of the awakening that we've had with respect to how women were being treated and how victims were being treated. So it was a very different mindset back then. You know, it was very much focused on shaming victims, sadly,
Right.
for coming forward, which is why a lot of victims didn't want to come forward, because they knew that they would be viciously attacked. And they knew there was a certain part of the population that would fall in line and say, you know, oh, these young girls, they're just out for money and they're liars and all of this.
Right.
And it was a very different time. And I think that as time went by and all of these big high profile cases started coming forward, I think it changed the public perception of how people who are famous were really kind of acting inappropriately.
Right.
And I think with a new generation coming in and looking at it going, we don't want that to be what we're like.
Yeah.
You know, let the old people act crazy like that. We want to be on the right side of history.
Yeah.
And that's how I think everything started to change, and that ball started rolling down the hill. And then once, you know, I've represented victims of Bill Cosby, and I think it was even a different dynamic for those cases.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Time Magazine came out with a cover story listing all of the victims of Bill Cosby on their cover. I mean, it was amazing at the time as to how the victims were treated differently for those cases versus how these poor young girls were treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the mid 2000s.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way people look at power, you know, and influence, is it as bad as people think? You were on the inside and saw everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. You know, the sad thing is that I think that rich and powerful people, once they become rich and powerful, they kind of lose their filter and they become the geometrically more magnified persona of whoever they are.
Yeah.
Right? If they're nice, if they're giving, then they can become wonderful, nice, giving people because now they have all of this money and power to be able to do that. If they're not, then they have no guardrails. You know, the money and power buys them whatever they want.
Right.
And I found that, you know, rich and powerful people tend to get bored very easily.
Yeah.
And when they get bored, they start doing things that threaten other people and cause harm to other people. And it's bad. It can be very bad.
In terms of that, is that case done? Or are there still more things to come if the political climate changes, et cetera, et cetera?
So that's the second most famous question that most people in the media ask me. Are we done? And I think I said yes once, and I'll never do that again. You know, because look, at the end of the Netflix documentary, Filthy Rich, that I did, they're like, oh, is this the end of the story now? He's dead. And I'm like, maybe, we'll see. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. That was what, 4 years ago? There are always new things that are coming out. You know, the Department of Justice releasing all of those records just opened up everything that had been kept secret and hidden for so many years. Right. With all of these people that were involved. And we're still seeing improper and illegal redactions in the files that should be unredacted. And I think that once those redactions are removed, you're going to see a whole new wave of accountability.
Yeah.
So that's my hope.
Are there still lawyers fighting for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, there are still victims that are in active litigation trying to get some of those records unsealed and released. They're still not releasing to the victims themselves some of their own files.
Wow.
They're keeping all that secret still.
Yeah.
Which is a direct violation of the act that, the victims got passed in Congress. That's no insignificant feat. They got the House and the Senate to agree to a monumental bill that had never been seen before to release documents of an investigation with the Department of Justice. Amazing. And then you get the president to actually sign it. I mean, that's amazing. But then the problem is that there was no enforcement. There
Right.
was no clause in the Epstein Act, and I think it was intentional, that says what happens if the Department of Justice breaks the law.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody envisioned that would happen, right? It's happening.
Yeah.
They broke the law. They didn't release the documents in time, as according to the act. And then the ones they released, they didn't follow the law when it came to the redactions. And basically, they're just going, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Sorry.
Right. It's sad.
Yeah. It's really sad. It's really sad. And, I hope that with potentially a different administration, things might change when it comes to the documents themselves. And when they become fully unredacted as the law envisioned, then there might be a whole new wave of accountability.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with clients like this and you're, on the one hand, you have to make your case and your point, to the press. And I'm not just talking about Epstein, but just in fact, the court, sort of the general practice and dealing with the media. How do you protect them at the same time get your story out?
It's different for every case, right? Some victims want to speak out. They want the world to know their story. And I support that. And we, direct them, we coach them, we talk about how to tell the story, the right story to tell, the answers to, not to give, but the way to phrase their answers so that it's not used against them later, hopefully. And then there are the victims that don't want to be known. And in those cases, for example, in the Epstein cases, there's a lot of victims that I represented that are still anonymous even to this day.
Right. You're their advocate. You're their voice.
You've got to be able to be their voice, right? I have to step forward and kind of be the voice for them and try to blunt some of the impact of the negative stories that are coming out and tell the truth. And I always tell people, look, the best way to defeat bad people is sunshine, right? Shine a light on what's happening, show everybody what's happening, which is why no matter who asks me to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about everything that happened, all the problems that occurred in the Epstein case, because I want everyone to know on the broadest scale possible how this all played out so that hopefully it never happens again. And I want people to be shocked at, how awful the government was with the cases and how awful of a job they did and how it was a complete and utter failure. Because if we can talk about it, then hopefully we can correct it and not have this happen again.
I mean, that's really, just going back to just a general discussion of the law. I mean, that's really what makes the work that you guys do so important is, you get attacked for a lot of different things, but somebody has to stick up for anyone who's been wronged, whether you got, rear-ended on 95 or, someone ended up dead. I mean,
It's true.
Somebody has to advocate, and attorneys are the ones who are really going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I did, before I started working on these cases, when I was working at Ricci Leopold, we did a lot of what's called crashworthiness work, automobiles and making them safe.
Yeah.
Many people take for granted airbags, right? But if you go back in history, back at the time of, let's say, Ralph Nader, they were fighting against putting airbags in cars. The automobile industry and the automobile lobby was going to Congress going, these things are unsafe. We don't want to put them in cars. They're dangerous. And everybody's wrong about these things. it was only because of lawsuits against the auto manufacturers, because of how dangerous some of those cars were,
Yeah.
that eventually they turned things around by getting a bunch of judgments against them. And then they realized, oh, wow, okay, I guess we better fix these things and put airbags in them.
Yeah.
Right? There's to this day, if you open your car door, there's a metal pin that sticks out of the frame.
Yeah.
And it prevents that door from flying open in a crash. And in fact, firefighters are taught that's one of the first things they have to cut with the jaws of life.
Yeah.
That pin was put in because of lawyers, because of litigation, of people that were flying out of vehicles during crashes. And to this day, it's called the Nader pin. Without lawyers, it would have never existed because they didn't think it was necessary. The auto industry said that we don't need to put that in. They made people safer because of the lawsuits that they were bringing and showing the auto industry that these vehicles need to be safer. You know, look, the insurance industry comes out with their crashworthiness tests of vehicles, and people look at that. What's the safest vehicle I can put my family in?
Right.
Why
Yeah,
did
I
that
remember
happen?
we did videos with you guys on the ones I remember specifically were roof crush tests.
Yep.
Right. And so something could pass the test, but then really still not be safe because when the vehicle rolled over,
Sure.
you know, the forces were not what the way the test was being done didn't really apply to what happens in the real world.
Yeah. And look, it's because of lawyers that forced the industry to look at themselves and the failures that were occurring that things ended up getting safer. They forced accountability on that platform. It happens in the medical industry. You know, doctors will tell you, oh, lawyers are suing for crazy things and you know, we're practicing medicine to just protect us against lawsuits. That's not true. It never has been true, right? We look at medical malpractice cases. I look at them daily. We accept maybe 1%.
Yeah.
Maybe 1% of the cases that come in our door. None of those cases are frivolous. The ones that we take, we look at and go, oh my God, how could that possibly happen?
Yeah.
But it makes medicine safer by pointing out failures within the industry that they don't either want to recognize or refuse to recognize, even though it's in their face. And if we hold them accountable for it, maybe they'll think twice, or at least their insurance company will tell them, hey, look, you better be more careful.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a self-serving question, which is about sort of the impact of, we talked about media, but video, presentation work, all those tools that are at your disposal now as attorneys. How has that changed, you know, the way that cases are argued, won, fought, settled, et cetera?
It's, you know, being able to utilize media effectively is monumental to our industry. You know, the practice of law, especially when it comes down to trials, it's a show because you have to capture the jury's entertainment. You have to capture their attention as to what the story is, and you have to be a better one at telling the story than your opponent. You have to humanize your client, and the only way to do that is through video. You know, look, a picture, they say, is 1,000 words. A video is 1,000,000. You know, I tell my clients every day, if they're in a crash, take pictures, sure, but take video with sound, you know, with the sirens blaring and the people around asking what's happening. And that's so impactful to the story that when you're in a courtroom later, you can tell the story through that video, and being able to produce something that evokes that emotion and impact only gets you further down the process of letting the jury understand your case and your client and what had happened to them.
Yeah. Big stuff.
Big stuff.
We could talk for another couple hours, but we should probably wrap it up. So thank you so much, man. I appreciate the time.
Appreciate you.
This was great.
Anytime.
And where can people reach you and Gold Law if they want to get in touch?
It's real easy. goldlaw.com. And our phone number is 561, and then just keep pushing the 2. So 561-222-2222.
All right. Well, thanks, Spencer. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
If you'd like to appear on Courtside Convo, send us an email or visit us at legalgraphicworks.com. Look for new episodes every Thursday on the Legal Graphic Works YouTube channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a show. Thanks for watching.